everybody. I see the room is filling. Welcome to our Inside Scoop. I'm hoping that you can hear me. I see smiling faces and some nodding. If you can't hear us, please do what you can, because while there will be beautiful pictures throughout, there's also going to be a fair amount of speaking. So I'm hoping that that we'll be able to work through this. So welcome. My name is Dave Schaub. I'm the Executive Director of the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy. It's a real treat to see so many smiling faces. As you all know, it's been a long time since we've been able to gather obviously in person, and we've sorely missed you. And so this is second best, but it'll have to do. And we're grateful to you for being here tonight. So we have big news to share with you, and we had intended that you would be the first to hear our news tonight, but and hence the name, the Inside Scoop. We managed to scoop ourselves, and did so with the best of intentions. We sent a press release out just a few days ago, thinking that it would take a good week or so for the press to pick up on the story. And in fact, the Spokesman Review is clearly so eager for good news that they ran a story in Sunday's paper about the subject that we're sharing with you tonight. So it's still a surprise for those of you who don't read the Spokesman. For those of you who do read the Spokesman, bear with us. I wanted to say a few words before we go on with the program about how this project fits into our current strategy and our work over the last few years. Actually, before I do that though, I'll just give you sort of a sense of what to expect for the night. So we're hoping that we'll be letting you go at around 6:15, 6:20-ish. If there's a ton of energy and enthusiasm for questions, we can go a little bit longer, but we'd rather let you get on with your night. And I'm sure many of you are have other things planned. Perhaps some of you will be participating in Riverkeeper's spoken word tonight. And so that's important, and we want to be sure you have time for that. So after I make some comments, we're going to pass over to one of our friends and advocates for this project, who's going to share some words about kind of the backstory. We're then going to go into two staff presentations to hear more about the land itself and our plans for the property going forward. And then I'll wrap things up and open it up for questions and answers. So as you are thinking of questions, we invite you to use the chat feature to type your questions in. We'll also be just having a conversation, and we're going to try to organize things by asking you to raise your hand, which you can do physically. There's also a feature in Zoom in the participants button at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, it should open up a sidebar and allow you to raise your hand. And Carol, who's going to be moderating things for us tonight, will be calling on people. So I did want to do a quick screen share over to Google Earth to show you how this project fits into sort of the bigger picture. So I'm hoping now that you can see a Google Earth view of the Spokane Coeur d'Alene metro area. This is a really amazing tool that our very dedicated volunteer, Eric Erickson, has made even more versatile for us by placing our protected properties outlines into a Google Earth view. So the dark orange are all conserved properties that your conservancy, with your support, has permanently protected. I think it's really an amazing footprint to see. The lighter orange properties are outlines of projects that we consider active, that we hope to see come into permanent protection in the coming 5 years. So our footprint is wide and it's varied. And we're really thrilled in the last few years to have brought some very interesting high visibility public benefit projects into the mix, like our Rimrock to Riverside project area, which many of you know and have supported generously, as well as our Make Beacon Public project. These are newer kinds of initiatives for the Conservancy, and what we're finding is that they're building support and momentum for increased conservation throughout the area. We're really thrilled, as our report as of just earlier this afternoon is we have 43 new members that have joined the Conservancy since July, and that's a testament to the fact that this higher visibility kind of work is paying off in really handsome dividends. So the property that we've protected most recently, adding to this mix of high visibility public benefit projects, is in North Spokane. It's along the banks of the Little Spokane River. It's now, because it's completed, outlined in orange here. And it's immediately adjacent to state-owned land that's managed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I don't want to go into too many more details because you're going to be hearing about it more later, but I did just want to give you sort of a geographic reference for what we're talking about tonight. Oops, I just closed my notes. Sorry, one moment here. In fact, I may have actually X'd out them of, there we go. So I want to be sure to take a moment to recognize all of the partners that have helped make this happen. Obviously, this work isn't done by Conservancy staff alone or by any one individual alone. It takes a whole community effort to make something like this happen. And so I'd like to recognize and actually ask you to raise a glass along with me if you have one. We'd like to raise a toast to the many partners that helped make this happen. That includes the Friends of the Little Spokane River Valley, our agency partners, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and our new friends at the Spokane Tribe of Indians, State Representative Marcus Riccelli, who was absolutely instrumental in securing the funding to make this land purchase, and of course, Inland Northwest Land Conservancy staff, board, volunteers, and then most especially you, our dedicated and loyal supporters. So cheers to all of you. Thank you. There is one individual who deserves a special call out, and I'm really pleased that he's our next speaker. Rob Allen was an early visionary around the conservation of this beautiful piece of land. And I'm going to let him tell you more about himself, but we're so pleased to have come alongside you, Rob, in helping to achieve this vision. So thanks so much for being here.
Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. And please bear with me as I try to recount from memory. Many of you probably know that the sequence sometimes gets a little garbled as we go through memory these days, but I'm going to do my best to recount for you how we got here, and want to just give a special thanks to my companion president in the Fairwood Homeowners Association of Chris Zeller, who's on the call with us today. We have a homeowner association here that really got involved early, and then also speaking as a founder of the Fairwood Farmers Market. And so with that, let me first say that reading from my notes here, that heading down the switchback trails behind the Fairwood neighborhood into the Waikiki Springs natural area, for me, it's like dropping down out of a cloud of suburban demands and distractions and into kind of a meandering oasis of peaceful solitude. My family's been enjoying this local escape since 1985 when we first moved here from Spokane's south side. As you hike down to the river level, nearby rooftops kind of get swallowed up by the surrounding treetops. And soon I find myself pondering the generations of those who've made this same trek before me and those who will come after us. The availability of this portion of the Waikiki Springs natural area on the lower hillside of what we local is commonly referred to as Rattlesnake Ridge, so down on the bench next to the river, really came onto our radar in 2016. It was in the course of nominations being solicited during the Spokane County Conservation Futures Outreach. The neighborhood, through the Fairwood Farmers Market, was already focused at the time on preserving the switchback trails down to the old waterfront Waikiki Dairy behind Bozarth Mansion. Once earmarked for a second fish hatchery, that land had been deemed surplus by the Washington Fish and Wildlife Department. We called our first initiative SOS, for Save Our Switchbacks. And eventually the covenants associated with the DFW land proved to be sufficient for its preservation. But simultaneously, it came on our radar that nearly 100 adjoining acres were going on the market and needed to be preserved if a long-term trails easement connecting to the confluence of the Little Spokane and Spokane rivers was ever going to be realized. Our neighborhood had the good fortune of having been the stomping grounds of an active statewide trails planner named Daniel Collins, who looked us up on a visit back to Fairwood from his permanent Seattle home. The farmers market eventually hired Collins to perform a detailed scoping study about the potential of linking our local trails to other routes connecting to Spokane's Riverside State Park. He coined the descriptive title for our site, The Middle of the Little. Collins connected us with the Land Conservancy's Chris DeForest, who invited us to a strategic meetup at the local Thomas Hammer coffee shop. Chris then linked us to the Friends of the Little Spokane River upstream and the Spokane County Parks Department downstream. Then Dave Schaub entered the picture from the Lands Conservancy, as well as Todd Dunfield, who began organizing trail management parties and historical tours. Daniel Zekin, the local fish and wildlife land access manager, enthusiastically started showing up to every event we had down there with his shovels and garbage bags, native plants to replant. And as a result of all this activity, State Parks planner Michael Henkinson caught wind of us and put together a camp meeting at nearby Meade High School to gauge community interest in our project. I subsequently testified at the State Parks Commission meeting over in Vancouver, Washington, and the Middle of the Little route was incorporated into the potential long-term boundary for Riverside State Park. But ultimately, I think it was a Spokesman Review article about our neighborhood initiative that caught the eye of 3rd District State Representative Marcus Riccelli, a graduate of Meade High School. Marcus showed up first with a group that included elected state budget makers and state park officials for a what if tour. Then he came back to Fairwood with another group of stakeholders for a how can we meeting. Finally, he hosted a cross-state Zoom session with a concrete plan. So if you're listening, Marcus, thank you. I think the best part of this story is how so many participants of our neighborhoods, our county, our city, our state employees, our elected officials, all played a role in achieving the goal of preserving this spectacular urban natural area for future generations. It's heartwarming to know we're setting aside a special place where our children, grandchildren, and their descendants will be able to experience a live moose knee-deep in the Little Spokane, to see bald eagles patrolling their own native sanctuary, and to hear coyotes howling at the moon. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Together, I think we've made a little local history.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was really wonderful. I'm pleased now to introduce Todd Dunfield, whom many of you know, perhaps because you've had the good fortune of walking this land or other land with Todd. Todd is our community conservation program manager. He's a dedicated champion for regional land conservation. And he also navigated the very bureaucratic and burdensome hurdles of working with state funding and doing the due diligence necessary to secure this property. So take it away, Todd. Thanks for your work on this.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that introduction. I'm going to share my screen and take you on a bird's eye view of the property through some drone footage. So let me start that now. Hopefully that's on all your screens at home. A little confirming head nod would be great. Good. So let me begin by providing some additional context at the start of this video. This drone footage was taken during the spring of this year, and the scenery from 5 months ago was abundant with deep green, dark greens, and colorful buds on many of the plants. I, for one, enjoy the signs of spring occurring on the land out at Waikiki Springs, and I hope you can find some of those images in this video. I would like to echo the words of Rob Allen and personally thank my classmate and friend from Gonzaga University, Marcus Richelli, for his leadership in securing funds for this acquisition. In February and March of this year, during a very chaotic and challenging time when our state was beginning the collective response to the COVID-19 crisis, Marcus kept a clear head and organized the efforts in Olympia to secure capital funds from the state of Washington. His multi-year engagement in this site is to be very commended. Many in our community join me in collectively thanking Marcus for the creation of the Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve. I find these stepping stones in this video to be quite inviting, luring me to cross the outflow of the Waikiki Springs to see what is on the other side. I once brought a newcomer here for the first time on a hike, and they remarked immediately upon reaching this site by saying, "This is a 10-year-old child's dream come true. Having a beautiful spring like this to explore is something quite special." Now and into the future, many children and adults will be able to stand in awe of this beautiful place full of cattails and wonderful riparian habitats. A very welcoming area to explore time and time again, a place to visit in all 4 seasons and see something new. The Waikiki Springs is a place all about water. This is a place where you will find the Little Spokane River being recharged by the spring water from the Spokane Aquifer. This cold spring water is a near constant 45 degrees Fahrenheit and is known to cool the Little Spokane River by multiple degrees in the hottest part of the summer, and it actually warms the river by a few degrees in the dead of winter. This place is unlike anywhere else I've been in Spokane County. So unique and so beautiful. This is an area with numerous hiking trails that have begun to be discovered by those from around Spokane and the Inland Northwest region. What was once a turn-of-the-century dairy farm is now an oasis of important wildlife habitat connecting the Spokane River to areas like Mount Spokane and Sasheen Springs to the north, areas that INLC continues to work hard to conserve. This meandering river course allows for numerous oxbows and side channels with habitat for fish rearing and waterfowl. This section of the river was the historic home of the Spokane tribe of Indians. This was the home to one of the 3 bands of the tribe. The band who lived here was named for the steelhead, the fish who annually spawned up the Little Spokane River. The tribe had fish weirs in the river, and up to 80% of their dietary protein came from the harvesting and smoking of the fish. INLC has begun a warm partnership with the Spokane Tribe of Indians, specifically with their Natural Resources Department, to improve the habitat and search out future projects together on these, their usual and accustomed lands. A few months ago, a neighbor showed me an old black and white photo of the Spokane tribal members standing on the shores of the river with their teepees erected in the background and Rattlesnake Hill beyond that. It's a wonderful historic photo that I could someday see being included on interpretive signs here on the Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve. If you continue up the river, past these rocks and around the corner, you'll visit the town of Dartford and go on and eventually reach the Wandermere Golf Course, to give you some context. This property comes with a plethora of recreation and learning opportunities. I foresee many of the users being hikers, bird watchers, and photographers. Just before sunset is a great time to head out to Waikiki Springs with a camera to capture the golden hour and the sunset. One future use that excites me the most is the opportunity for youth from across the region to come here to learn about riparian habitats, study geology, some great rocks, soil and water conservation, Spokane tribal history, and many other topics. These 200 acres of public open space provide numerous sites for case studies of things like erosion. One fourth grade teacher who I led on a hike here about 6 months ago from the Meade School District was ecstatic about being able to use this area to teach her fourth graders a lesson about erosion. Speaking of erosion, you'll see some trails there, but one of the management decisions that I will be helping to spearhead here at INLC are the decisions regarding trails. There are more than a handful of user-built trails, trails that we call social trails that have been put in on the property over many years. But we hope to engage the community to help guide a trail planning process that might lead to some decommissioning efforts of trails that are poor and too steep, and limit a careful creation of new trails that are sustainable, trails that won't erode, trails that offer users a wonderful experience for years and years to come. As many of you know, trail design and construction is something, a bit of a passion of mine, something that I love. And I know that there are many others in our community who are eager to get out and start planning and digging in the soil. And hopefully this winter we can spend time with doing the planning, and hopefully this spring we can get out and start decommissioning trails and potentially building new trails. During the whole process, we hope to have updated maps to help with wayfinding as the trails change. And there are many beautiful places to, stop and take a viewpoint in, like you're seeing from the top of the ridge here. This is sort of the most high elevation on the entire property. And this view, from here you can see the volume of water on the land, how the river has multiple channels and islands, and it really is a wonderful place to visit and explore. From here, you can get a feeling for why animals like bald eagles build their nests here. They decide to build their home here. Why coyotes and moose are often seen passing through, using this as a wildlife habitat corridor to connect to places like Mount Spokane. Just this last week, I had the opportunity to be out on the land doing some work, and I encountered a very docile gopher snake on the property. Realizing that the land was its home and not mine, I stopped and took a few pictures and then continued on my way. And I hope other people do the same, just kind of take in the beauty and keep going. One of the great things about Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve is the walk-in access. There's not a trailhead, where you can drive to. You have to access the property through the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And it does help clear the mind doing that walk down the switchbacks. I'm glad, thanks to Rob for pointing that out. I will be leading a few small hikes in November and December on the land, and I welcome all of you to sign up for those. You'll receive an email after tonight, and when you get that, please do sign up for one of those events. So that kind of ends our tour, and I will stop share. Hopefully you're not seeing my screen anymore. And next on tonight's agenda is to hear from Miss Rose Richardson, our conservation and stewardship specialist here at INLC, and she has a slideshow to share and some words about the future work that she will be leading out on the property. So Rose.
Thank you, Todd. Dave is going to share a presentation with some pretty photos here in a second. Awesome. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Todd, for that introduction. Like he said, my name is Rose Richardson. I'm the Conservation and Stewardship Specialist and the Preserve Manager for Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve. So while we're looking at these pretty pictures, I want to take a moment to kind of plant a seed in your mind. And that seed is the word stewardship. Stewardship or steward means something a little bit different to everyone. We all have a different definition in our brains. But one of the most common interpretations is a person who takes care of something, someone who takes responsibility for something. And that's something that we hold near and dear at INLC. Next slide, please, Dave. Some more pretty drone footage. So the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy has, with your help and the help of our partners, protected this beautiful, rich place, but that's just the start of it. Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve presents us kind of a unique opportunity to show those stewardship muscles and show that we can, take care of this property in perpetuity. That's how we think as land trusts, is many, many, many generations down the road, what will this property look like? So we're taking very careful, deliberate steps here at INLC over the next several years to move in a positive direction with that stewardship. So when I think of perpetuity, I like to think in terms of kind of like planting a tree. Like I know that's kind of a stewardship thing of me to think, but I think of stewardship like planting a tree. You are very careful to pick exactly the right spot for it to go. You pick the right tree to go in that spot. You plant it really carefully and water it and put mulch on it in the winter and protect it from wildlife that might want to munch on it before it's ready. And you know, if we play our cards right and do everything right, that tree will outlive everyone that helped to plant it in the first place. And as that tree grows, you know, wildlife will use it and people will sit under it when it's big and tall and beautiful and teach their kids about the importance and beauty of nature. And Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve is kind of giving us that same opportunity here. If we take the right steps now and over this next several years, Waikiki Springs will transform from this already really stunning, beautiful, diverse place into, like Rob said, a true oasis, you know, a true beautiful oasis for us to coexist and be part of nature in a meaningful way. All right, next slide. Okay, so to get there, we need to do a few things. One is to take care of the land itself. Next is to keep the preserve safe and enjoyable for the community. And as a community, we also need to educate ourselves, especially our younger folks, about what it means to be a good steward and to take care of the land. So part of our first steps in this long, this long generation-long stewardship journey we're on will be slowly improving the habitats that currently exist on the property. It's a very diverse place, like we've been saying. It's got that beautiful river corridor, wet meadows, ponderosa pine forest, lots of unique, cool outcroppings full of reptiles and stuff. And so the diversity is really critical for wildlife, and we want to enhance that in any way we can. And so we'll be doing that by removing a lot of invasive things that have moved in since a lot of those sewer lagoons have been filled in. We'll be planting native stuff that's good for wildlife, and we'll be carefully managing the forest for fire risk. Next slide. Awesome. So when we think about enhancing wildlife habitat, we need to consider a few things: food, water, and shelter. And we have water covered, obviously. As Todd said, the property is covered in water. But food and shelter are areas that we could work on. So that'll include, like I said, promoting the growth of native species on the property. In this photo, almost everything growing low to the ground is invasive and has kind of pushed out all that native stuff. So we're going to remove some of that and promote things that wildlife like. So next slide has some examples. So we'll remove those non-natives and invasives and plant things that wildlife can actually eat or use. So species like elderberry, Oregon grape, snowberry, roses, kinnikinnick, native grasses, stuff that provides berries and seeds, food sources. We'll also be planting native trees and shrubs that can provide that kind of cover shelter aspect. Things like cottonwood, alder, aspen, things that grow really well in wet areas. And also shrubs like ocean spray and mock orange that are really good for bird habitat. And these provide you know, great nesting habitat and add a little extra cover, like I said, for those larger species like deer and moose and coyote and maybe even some mountain lion. So, all right, next slide. Forest management wise, we're going to try to keep it pretty light so it stays really beautiful and you still feel like you're immersed in nature when you walk through the property. But what we do want to be careful for is reducing fire risk. So doghair ponderosa pine, like you can kind of see on the right side of that trail, is an example of what we call a ladder fuel. And that can make fires a lot more severe and damaging to the canopy. So we'll thin out a lot of those smaller trees and reduce that fuel, which allows the trees that are left behind to have the nutrients and space and water that they need to be really healthy. Next slide. So the next step will be to create a natural space that is safe and enjoyable and sustainable for the community. The first steps there will include, like Todd said, building trails and posting signs to orient people to the property and increasing staff and trained volunteer presence on the property. And there are several social trails, like Todd said, present throughout the preserve, but we're going to build some of those up and close some of them down to make sure that the trails that we end up with are accessible, they provide good views, enable a good nature experience, but are also routed really carefully to protect important habitat features so that people and wildlife can both thrive on the preserve. Next slide. All right, this is our last one. Lots of kids planting stuff. So to truly make this place a community preserve, we want you all to be involved in that stewardship process. If you're excited for the new trails, come build them with us. Go out with Todd. He's really fun to build trails with. If you want to learn more about restoration and make a difference for wildlife, come to a planting party. If you want to explore the property in a new light, join us for a Field Friday and you'll get to walk around with me for an insider tour of the property and complete a project that we need to do for management. And to take your stewardship to the next level, you can take our online volunteer land steward training. And many of these events, like Todd was saying, are open for registration now if you're interested. Regardless, we can't make this a true community space without our community, and that's you. You make a really big difference. So, and it's vitally important too that we include our younger generation in that stewardship as well. We'll be working with the Meade School District, St. George's, and other outdoor youth education programs to really get those kids out on the land. We want to see, like Todd was saying, busloads of kids out on field trips, planting trees with us, joining us for after school programs, joining other outdoor education programs hosted on the preserve. And you definitely play a role in that. All of us do. The time you spend in nature with your kids and grandkids and any kids in your life really makes a big difference in their lives. I certainly wouldn't be where I am now doing what I do if it wasn't for time with my family outside. So bring them with you to planting parties, take them on hikes, get them outside, especially at Waikiki Springs because it's such a beautiful place with lots of beautiful things to see. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next and see what the future holds for Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve. It's such an awesome place, and we have so much support with you guys that it's impossible not to really dream big, which is exciting. So we have these few concrete steps in mind right now, but with your help, the possibilities are really endless. So thanks for being a part of this with us. Back to you, Dave.
Someone's got to do it at least once a meeting to mute themselves and talk over. Rob Lindsay, our board president, is nodding along. That's a line I stole from him. I hope you feel as inspired not only by the land, but by this team that we have here at the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy. I feel very moved right now to be part of this group. Our staff, our volunteers, our board, and all of you. So it really is a celebration, and it's part of an ongoing celebration. The successes are coming kind of fast and furious at this point for Inland Northwest Land Conservancy, and we're just so pleased about it all. So thank you for being a part of it with us. One of our friends sent us an email. I'm not going to out her, but I'll just give you a hint. She's on the call tonight. So if you want to try to figure it out, go for it. Anyway, she sent us an email just 2 days ago, and I'm going to read it to you. She writes, "A friend and I were hiking the middle of the Little on Thursday, late afternoon. It was her first time, and we were crossing the river to return to my house. That was a beautiful day with lots of color in the leaves, even though the cottonwoods were still pretty green. The sun was shining, but with dramatic dark clouds passing by. As we approached the bridge, a young family on the other side looked to be very excited about something. The dad had his arms up in a victory sign, usually associated with touchdowns, and the mom and the girls were all smiles. As we got closer, one of the girls asked if she could tell us something. Sure, we said. Then she showed us with her hands apart the size of a big fish under the bridge. Her dad asked us if we knew about the place. He said they were there to celebrate because the middle of the Little had just become a public space. He proudly said that they had worked hard to make it so. I never caught their names, sadly, but INLC made them very, very happy. Didn't have the heart to say I knew, so we just agreed it was terrific. Thought you might enjoy it. Anyway, I think that is, yeah, right. That's a testament to the importance of this work and the returns on the investments that we all make to support it. So I want to open it up for questions, and but I wouldn't be doing my job as executive director if I didn't make mention of some facts about our fundraising this year. As you know, we weren't able to host our Appetite for Conservation, and that represents a significant portion of our revenues. Thanks to Carol, our new communications and philanthropy director, we've made up a good difference in that fundraising gap. But we're still $45,000 behind schedule for this time of year in terms of our annual fundraising. And then, as you can also imagine, with this new property, we have ongoing stewardship costs. And so there remain lots of opportunities for supporters to fuel our work. And those don't include just cash gifts. You can introduce us to friends that you know. You can invite some of those friends on hikes like those that Todd has planned, or stewardship events like those that Rose has planned. You can give the gift of membership. What a wonderful holiday gift. Obviously, you can continue to generously invest in this work. You can do so through your annual giving or planned gifts out of your estate, or required minimum distributions from your retirement accounts, etc. You can give those into our unrestricted funds, or you can give them into our restricted endowment funds. And I don't ask this lightly because you are among our most generous supporters, but I ask it as an invitation for you to consider how you invest your assets. And I hope you'll see that the returns on these investments are enduring and rewarding in so many ways. So now I think we'll all stop talking and open it up to questions and let you have a chance at the mic. I see there's been a little bit of conversation in the chat. Rebecca asked about some of the slash piles that were visible in the flyover. Those are in fact not massive beaver dam remnants, which would be awesome, but rather they are slash piles. It looks like someone else, then there was some ongoing conversation. Chris Zeller chimed in about beavers being very near the footbridge in recent years, which is great and a sign of healthy riparian ecosystem. Rose is nodding her head. Rose is a big beaver believer, as am I, and I know many of you are as well. And so we'd love to see more beaver activity down there in the future. Does anyone want to just jump in and unmute themselves or raise their hand? I guess I'm always for like the chaotic approach, but I'm sure Carol would rather I take a more organized approach here. So does anyone want to raise their hand and either make a comment or ask a question? I can't see everyone, so forgive me if you're raising your hand. And
well, I see that Chris just admitted to him and his family being the ones that were in that story. So
all right.
Thank you, Chris, for your support
Chris
and advocacy and hard work.
Dave, I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat now about connecting with local universities, and that has already begun. Rose, do you want to take that question?
Sure. let's see. Oh, all right, there we go. Yes, so we are working with students at Gonzaga University that are part of an environmental science, wildlife biology kind of class, and they're designing projects around wildlife monitoring. So we're placing cameras on the property to see what's there, what's moving around, where it's going, so we can get a better picture of how the land is being used by the wildlife that's there. Yeah.
Another question came up in the chat asking, I think this was just to me privately. The question is, what do you see the property looking like in 10 years and who will be using it? That's a great open-ended question that I'm not sure we have a really super clear answer to yet. Rose, do you want to take a stab at it as using your tree planting metaphor? What's this tree going to look like in 10 years?
Well, trees don't grow very fast, but let's see. I guess really what we're going for, like Todd and I have been saying, is sustainable trails that people use and love and use frequently. And so we want to see lots of folks out using those trails and experiencing the property. We also want to see, you know, a little bit more of a healthy understory of plants developing in that kind of ponderosa pine forest area as a kind of a buffer to the riparian area. So really we're going for habitat development too. So if we can knock down some of those invasives, I am going to be really stoked, but that is also, as stewardship goes, a long process.
We also have some really exciting, lofty conversations underway about fish habitat improvements and fish reintroduction work that could potentially happen down the road. These are in very early stages of conversation, and so we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, there's a lot of complications there, but that would be an exciting component of and was frankly one of the key reasons why this land was supported for protection by so many organizations and funders.
So there's a question in the chat box about young people swimming in the river area. Will that be allowed? Todd or Rose, could one of you speak to the recreational uses of the land going forward?
Sure, I'll take that one. And Rose, if you don't mind taking the question about the man-made structures like concrete foundations and such next. But with pertaining to swimming in the river, that's going to remain a non-allowable use. It's currently illegal to swim in the river. WDFW does allow fishing, but not swimming, humans or dogs. And so just so everyone is aware, we are going to mirror our usage and management policies around things like dogs on leash and what have you. The same rules that you're accustomed to finding on the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife side are going to extend onto the 95 acres of the Waikiki Springs Nature Preserve. So there won't be any immediate change once you cross the bridge and enter the Nature Preserve. That's something we may reevaluate, years from now if something's not working. But the things like no camping, no fires, all those listed non-allowable uses that Fish and Wildlife have will also pertain to the land across the north side of the river there. Rose, you want to talk about the foundations and some of the old man-made structures that can be found out there?
Oh yes. So there are, because the property did have some infrastructure on it before, there is a lot of concrete on the property, old staircases, and it looks like old basement foundations and everything. It's kind of spooky. But generally what we're going for is what's going to make the property safe. And some of those staircases don't really, affect public safety. So we're going to leave some of that stuff. But areas where there are a couple of those foundations where we do see evidence of camping and fires and stuff. And so we want to mitigate that any way we can. Removing heavy concrete from a place like that is hard and expensive. And so we want to be careful about how we approach that. But it's definitely something that we're considering.
One thing I'll just chime back in here to add to the question about intentions for our ownership, and this really is front and center for us, is that we really intend to be good neighbors to the private landowners whose lands surround ours. There's been a legacy of trespass, not only through this property that we just secured for public access, but onto neighboring lands as well. And it is our hope to engage trail users in beefing up the fence lines so that they have a ownership sense in sort of the boundaries of the property and may reduce their own trespassing tendencies. In fact, Todd led a group of volunteers out there just last Thursday to do some signage and fencing reinforcement. So that's really a key and core value of ours, is to be good neighbors, and to do so also, as Rose has mentioned, from a fire mitigation standpoint as well. Obviously, we can't control everything, but our intention is to manage the forest in a way that reduces fire risk as much as possible. Some of you may know this land also as having been kind of a party spot for local teenagers in the past. And what we can't do and won't do is arm a police force to patrol the properties. And so that's where Rose's comments about community engagement are really important. Not that we want the militia out there to patrol the property either, but we do feel like positive use and a sense of community ownership of the property can really help reduce some of the problematic issues that have been present on the property in the past. So I do see the time. We're now at 50 minutes, but I don't want to cut this off if there are some vital questions that haven't been asked yet.
I think if folks aren't in the chat box, it's worth noting what Rob put in about the Fairwood Farmers Market applying for grants to organize outings for kids, and also habitat restoration work, not planting appetizers for the beavers that we love so much.
Yeah, good. And Dan Collins, Dan, it's so great that you're here. Another one of the crucial early visionaries in this effort. Dan asked about plans for the old settling ponds. We're actually, I'm going to let Todd answer this a little bit more in depth, but currently the plan is not to disturb them at all. I don't know that we went into great detail on this, but this property used to be the site of a water treatment facility. It was cleaned and mitigated, forgive me, I never used the right term, mitigated in the past, or it was cleaned up and capped. And so our intention is not to disturb that soil at all, not to flood it, not to, reconnect it to the river corridor.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Dave, that as part of our due diligence before purchase, we had environmental site assessment, phase 1 and phase 2 done of the entire property with emphasis on that area. And it's very hard ground. After it was remediated, the gravels that were on the edges were mixed with the clean soil that was still on site. And so now you have a pretty hard packed flat area. And so the most activity I think you will see in that old area is Rose and her work with a lot of volunteer help to try to address the weeds that have encroached there over the years.
Great. Well, what a bit of good news at a time when we all need good news, right? So thank you so much for joining us to celebrate this. And I just invite you, if you'd like, to unmute yourself and give a hoorah, and we'll call it a night.
Hoorah! Thank you. Good job.
Hoorah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hooray.
Nice job.
Pat yourselves on the back, Dave and Chris and Rose and Carol.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your hard work, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.